All right, I think we're all set to start the panel discussion. The topic for today's panel discussion is SEBI new guidelines and the role of enterprise mobility in it. Now it's time for me to call upon our panelists on stage. Our first panelist has already been here, but I would like to introduce him once again. He brings over 20 years of expertise in leading high-performing teams across global sales, strategic partnerships, IT, and more. A passionate driver of business transformation through technology. He holds a software engineering degree from the University of Ottawa. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a huge round of applause to Mr. Mustafa Ibadi, our Global Chief Operating Officer from SOTI. Thank you so much for joining us. Next up on the panel is somebody who comes again with 3 decades of experience, and he is iValue's Chief Executive Officer. He's leading experience across IT, telecommunications, cybersecurity, and software industries. Previously, VP APAC at FireEye, Mr. Srikanth successfully led substantial growth across the region. His extensive background includes key roles at Symantec, Cisco, Siemens, and Tata Telecom. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Mr. Srikanth Chitole. Give it up. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Srikanth. Next up, I'd like to call upon the moderator of this particular session. Let me introduce him. He is the CTO, and he's led the Technology Consulting and Services Division with over 25 years of diverse experience in sales, pre-sales, and service business across industries. He's held leadership roles at companies like Binary Spectrum, Obopay, EDS, Mphasis, driving growth in cybersecurity, risk management, and technical sales. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a huge round of applause for Mr. Mitesh Chitnavis, our CTO from iValue Group. Next up on the panel, we have somebody who is a seasoned cybersecurity and infrastructure architect with deep expertise in designing high-performance secure systems. He has led key projects including the cyber architecture for Afrinex, IRBX, and HPX stock exchanges, and has developed cutting-edge IRRA platform on a public cloud, to name a few. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a huge round of applause for Mr. Diwakar Rao. Our last guest on the panel is the Head of Information Security at Decathlon India, who brings over 14 years of IT experience, specializing in information security, risk management, compliance, and infrastructure. It's a pleasure to invite Mr. Krishnendu Datta, CISO Decathlon Sports India. Give a huge round of applause. Mr. Mitesh, I request you to please start the session.
So I guess, as you rightly said, this is going to be an absolute knowledge session. We have an esteemed panel with diverse background, and welcome all of you. Right? So just to get going, in best interest of time, I think we know SEBI guidelines have come out. They're new, they're updated. There was version 1, there was version 2, and there have been some mandates and mandatory requirements that they have placed. In that sense, let me start with Mr. Diwakar Rao, right? Because you're at the helm of it. And you know we have to build a market SOC as well as per the guidelines and so on and so forth, right? So how do you see now that panning up for all the regulated entities, and how would you help that?
Yeah. First of all, good evening, everyone. And thank you, iValue, for inviting me and expressing my views over here. So if you see the CSCRF, am I audible? Yeah, okay. So CSCRF, I think if you've gone through that pages, so it is vast kind of document. It's 256 pages over there and too many annexures over there, right? So we are still going through that. So and we are grabbing the points over there means what is, but if you consider the MSOC, okay, that is the mandatory aspect which is given by the SEBI, and that mandatory aspect has to be followed to every regulated entities as well as the market participants and the depositories as well, okay, those who are not having their own SOC, so they have to subscribe. And the regulations which are there and the guidelines which are there, so if you say related to the data security and privacy access control, okay, so they have two annexes on data security, then as well as on identity access management, okay, so there are a whole lot of things, okay, and they are not only guiding you or providing you to put it in the procedures or in the policies, okay, they are checking the controls as well as the effectiveness of that control, and they are actually evaluating that on the CCI, right? So that is the cyber capability index. So all this will be heavily come on the regulated entities, and we are still in MIS perspective or exchange perspective, we are having certain points in compliance, okay, but we are still evaluating where we are in not compliant or like that, okay. And in this digital era where the every enterprise is digitally transformed and their employees are working from home remotely, okay, so this the concept which we are talking about, enterprise mobility, that will come in play, and definitely there are certain solutions as well as the procedures and technological controls we need to put in place to abide with that guidelines, okay. So these are the things I think over the panel discussions it will come in discussions, okay. So this is the thing which is there in the CSCRF.
Got it. Understood. Fantastic. So just to follow up on that question, Shrikant sir, basically, how do you see digital transformation panning out and for the financial institutions and the regulated entities, and how, what kind of challenges do you feel that the SEBI guidelines implementation would have issues around challenges, and basically what I'm trying to say is that while we understand that the SOC has to be implemented, there are this, but regulated entities today already would have some kind of solutions in place, and how would it pan out over a period of next 3 years and so on and so forth?
I think, see, if you look at what's at the core for any of the SEBI's guidelines or even otherwise from the cybersecurity guidelines from the Ministry of IT or from Ministry of Finance point of view, if you look at it, what's important is data privacy, data security, and most important is the guidelines are all around actually these two areas. So cyber security is important, data privacy is important, data security is important. These three are at the core. And then the rest, everything is actually around the periphery. If you're talking about for example, IDAM. Now IDAM is actually the periphery. It's not at the core. At the core actually for every organization from the regulation aspect or even otherwise, for their own reputational benefit from the organization perspective or from the regulation perspective or from the legal and the financial aspect point of view, you got to protect these three areas fundamentally. Now, 10 years back there was no per se cloud kind of a requirement, right? But if you look at before COVID, did we ever hear the word called or jargon called CSPM? No. DSPM? No. Did we hear CNAP? No. But now suddenly in the last 2 to 3 years, we are hearing all these kind of jargons. So essentially, guidelines will keep coming up. Guidelines will keep changing up, depending upon how the attack surface is changing, how the landscape is changing actually from the application consumption perspective, how digital transformation has to be put into a speed, or you want to slow down. From all the aspects point of view, these all changes will have to happen. The new guidelines right now which have been issued, there will be further guidelines which will get issued based on what market changes are. So I don't think it's going to be a kind of a static implementation or static operations perspective. It will be always continuously evolving, and you have to keep adhering to what's coming up next. So whether you are creating your own SOC, whether you are looking at third-party SOC, you are doing a managed services shared SOC or dedicated, doesn't matter. You got to manage and maintain those three fabrics which I said at the core. Data privacy, data security, and cyber security. These three will have to be there. You are accessing from which device doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Got it. So accessing from which device doesn't matter, but at end of the day, data privacy, data security, and cyber security is absolutely important. You have to protect your crown jewels. So coming to Mustafa, how do you see, one is SEBI guidelines, but how do you see SEC, and you would have all these pillars, three pillars that Shrikant spoke about in the geographies that you are operating in? How do you see that panning out as well?
That's a great question, Mitesh. I don't think it's that different, to be honest with you. If you think about the SEC, or if you think about the regulatory organizations in UK, France, Germany, Canada, they're all focused on the 3 points that Shrikant raised, that you have to be there. Also, if you think about these publicly traded companies, these publicly traded entities, at the end of the day, the investment is coming from a shareholder. And that shareholder is the citizen of that country. So they also have a responsibility and the duty to make sure that they're protecting the investments of the people that are investing in those organizations. And earlier today, you and I were talking about, which is these guidelines. Of course, there are regulations, there are guidelines, and they're supposed to protect your economy security, they're supposed to protect your national infrastructure, but it also has to drive resiliency. Like you raised that one good point when we were chatting earlier, which is these regulations are just going to make the institution and the enterprises more resilient. So if there is a collapse of a financial system, if there's some kind of a cyber attack, if there's some global thing that will happen, like pandemic happened into 2020, these guidelines will make sure that while the enterprises and companies may see a bit of a hit, but they minimize that hit, they mitigate that risk, and they're resilient enough to stand back up. So overall, from our perspective, nobody likes regulation and compliance, let's face it, we're not a big fan of it, but these type of regulations and compliances just make us better as a company and as a country.
Awesome. So globally, the regulations are driving cybersecurity as well. You all have to be compliant, customers have to be compliant, and so on and so forth. So that brings a very interesting point, and Mr. Datta, basically Decathlon is obviously a French company, if I'm right? And so how are you managing, is it Indian regulations and French regulations and so on and so forth? How do you manage between both the regulations here?
Okay, thank you so much for inviting me today. And just to let you know, I mean, I am not dressed up as these gentlemen are, so really sorry about that. So today, I think, like, Decathlon as an organization, as you rightly mentioned, yes, we do have, we follow the rules. We don't literally follow the French rules, as a matter of fact, because there is a different French team who manages GDPR in their country. But today, the entire cyber security is coupled between, some global cyber security best practices along with the local guidelines, basically. When I talk about SEBI, of course, we are not somebody who is coming under the direct regulations of SEBI. But today, when I saw the presentation, your presentation itself, I think the best practices that are put forward, I think every organization, be it you are under a regulated body or not, that still makes more powerful. And I think it should be adapted by every Indian organization itself. Having said that, I think there's an upper edge for SEBI specifically, all the organizations that come under the SEBI regulations, because I think the SOC will be powered by SEBI. So specifically, any attacks that and any incoming attack to any specific organization, I think SEBI will be the right team to guide you and ensure that you are well protected, which the non-regulated organizations might not have. So I think we as an organization, if we are specifically talking about Decathlon, our entire SOC is managed by the United team along with certain aspects of India SOC team itself. And that's how we act upon any specific, cyber attacks or incidents per se.
Got it. Understood. Fair. Fair enough. So you have to strike balance, but you also have to ensure that the French team manages the GDPR and we have the Indian DPDPA Act coming in. So,
That's correct.
So just a curveball to Mustafa. We all have seen what happened with the CrowdStrike issue. Okay? And I think it would be very interesting for the organizations out here to also know, or the customers here to also know, how do you ensure that with your platform, such kind of things would not happen? What are the best practices kind of you follow to ensure this doesn't happen?
So for us as an organization, we have made a conscious decision that we provide dedicated cloud. And we are still, our architecture is single server. And it's costing us a lot of money, and a lot of partners and some people within SORI have made few asks or recommendations that instead of doing it on a single tenant, can we do multi-tenancy? And if we do multi-tenancy, we get a lot of benefits, but it comes from our president and CEO, Mr. Carl Rodriguez, that I mentioned earlier. He also acts as our CTO. And from his perspective, we will still continuously be on a single tenant, dedicated environment. And yes, more expensive for SORI, increases our cost, but it provides the level of security and assurances that our customers need. Because in today's day and age, similar to what CrowdStrike, one simple mistake, if you're in multi-tenancy environment, can bring all the customers down. So that, and we're taking some other steps as well. For example, making sure that any changes that we roll out, we want to make sure that we've got proper change management. We do it first in a very contained environment. We test the heck out of it to make sure that we've accounted for all the scenarios. And there are multiple other things that we do, but I think the number one initiative that we have, or the number one guiding principle that we have, is that dedicated cloud, single tenancy gives us the confidence and our customers the assurance that we will not have incidents like CrowdStrike.
Awesome, awesome. So, Shrikant sir, we always keep learning from you, and with all the experience that you have, two things. You have been meeting customers during your FireEye days now. I have two questions basically for you. One is, what are the typical challenges that the customers face when these kind of regulations come in, okay, or implementing cybersecurity solutions and so on and so forth? And second question, the follow-up question for that is, how can we simplify that? What is your advice to organizations, how to go about it?
I think I'll take the second question first, because that's where the CXO KRAs are. So if you look at from a classical CXO point of view, even Divakar is right here, but fundamentally it is all about, is my platform, right enough? Or whatever I'm doing actually is right enough from performance perspective. The second KRA will be always from the availability point of view, which is 24/7, 365 days kind of a thing. That's where the BCP practices or BCP guidelines will come in picture. The third one, actually, we are talking about, is it secured or not? Okay. Now, when he is coming from the security angle perspective, actually, number one, even his SOC operations will have to be secured enough, while he is actually securing the rest of the organization. And the last S, which always I say from the KRA perspective, is scalability. Is my platform giving me a performance, availability, security, and scalability? As long as these four words are covered, which I call it PAS, these are the classical KRAs for any CXOs from the current, from any organization perspective, that includes me as well. As long as you are getting these four words or the four letters, as long as you are getting covered, with the help of your best practices from the industry perspective or otherwise, you look at actually what you're going to protect or what you're going to do from that angle. And most important for these four letters, what is also equally important besides the controls from the security angle or even privacy angle, you also need to have the right people actually with you. So people always talk about the process piece of it, the tools part of it, etc. But people actually put a lot of less emphasis actually when it comes to the actual people or the skills. Every guideline or every changes which will bring coming in from the market perspective, now whether that is getting covered by the guidelines or otherwise, At the end of the day, it is your organization reputation which is at risk. In case if the reputation goes slightly haywire, you may also face a risk of legal, the financial, penalties. And the most important part of it, naturally then the regulator walks in, they'll put in a further complexity on you actually in terms of, you improve some of your scores, and then only we will be able to allow and open up some of these areas. And the last point, when you're doing all these things, supply chain you should not forget about, because that's where the maximum risk today is actually residing. If I have to look at from the enterprise mobility perspective, those three cores which I told you, those core areas, that's where I think if you ask me, I think SOTI has got a solution. The question comes back is, rest of the controls actually are all around that. So these are what my basic inputs are from the challenges perspective as well as what you should look at it. But never miss out on your KRA. From the KRA you start reversing actually and then see what needs to be done actually. Rather than, looking at first putting security controls and then figuring out. Because if I don't have the job, what do I do actually with all these controls?
Understood. Super. So, yeah. So, Divakar, now, it's so many transactions happening on your network, day in, day out. Financial system of India probably depends on how secure BSE is. It is part of national critical infra. So, there are obviously business requirements that keep coming, right? And how do you balance those business requirements with the security requirements you have with the scale that you operate at?
See, this is a tough question to answer, right? Because there will be always trade-off between security and business. And somehow exchange being a very critical infrastructure and availability is very important parameter for us, okay? Because the 1 minute of downtime will cause a huge impact on the market and on the Indian economy as well. So that is the reason, when any changes which is happening inside the organization, or we are launching any new application or doing modifications, so we need to think about we need to judge while doing all these things, how securely we will enable this, okay? What we need to do the risk prioritization of that particular application, okay, while deploying the changes. As well as one more thing, if anything mishap happens, okay, so how quickly we will be able to roll back and how quickly we will be able to bring the business up, okay. So that is the considerations we need to think about. Resiliency is very much important. And while, if there are any issues, okay, because we have a lot of procedure to bring any application or if there are any changes in application, so we have a lot of procedure, we need to do VAPT, application scan on all these things. Again, if there are any findings, so we need to go back to the developer and ask them to secure that. All these things are there. But if that is a mandatory requirement and if there are chances where we need to prioritize the business, right? So we need to then we need to think about what are the compensatory controls which are available with us. Through that, whether we will be able to launch that or not. So all these factors we need to consider before, and because it's as you said, it's a highly transaction oriented system, so, and it's very real time. Any one point failure will be a huge disaster. So all these parameters we need to think about while doing any sort of launching of new application or doing anything. So
fair enough. So
yeah,
we need to communicate, we need to balance, we need to ensure that we are enablers
as well as secure enough
while securing the platform. So we have two business guys here, and the question continues to them. That is Shrikant sir and Mustafa. You want to go? How would CISOs would communicate to you and convey that yes, there is a business requirement, but there is also security aspect to it, and how should they do that? Assume that I am a CISO, I have to communicate to you,
So I think, as rightly mentioned, business comes first, because without business we can't survive. So efficiency and productivity both are equally important, and that's the reason if you look at digital transformation perspective, irrespective of anywhere you are and with whatever device you have, you want to transact and you want to stay ahead. With that, naturally, you have to have a hygiene maintained, which is coming from the cyber resiliency perspective. And that is something which you cannot compromise, because whether you are regulated or not regulated, at the end of the day, your reputation is always at risk. So it's better to listen to the CISO well in advance, because once anything goes wrong, you can't fix your reputation. It can't come back, because you're now spending the money and you are giving the expenditure in your hands of your CISO. At the end of the day, you have to look at the best practices and go for it. Yes, the one word which comes to my mind always is that when you're looking at profit and loss or the balance sheet kind of discussions, what is your priority? So as long as the CXOs are bringing the priorities back to the CEO perspective, I don't think there will be any challenge in terms of how do we go about and what to do next. Because at the end of the day, you need a business resiliency, but you cannot actually move away from the cyber resiliency perspective. And resiliency doesn't mean that you have to always spend the money. Resiliency also means that are you guys working together? So business efficiency, business productivity, and the hygiene, all three will have to go hand in hand. So it's better to be proactive rather than reactive in some of these areas, because otherwise in reactiveness, I can't keep pointing back to my CFO and saying, okay, emergency funds, please keep releasing. That's not possible.
That's not possible.
Every now and then. So then only way I can come back is that change my CXOs and get the new CXOs. Or the board might change me.
Good one. So basically brand, reputation, balancing between all three aspects is absolutely critical. So Mustafa, you have any view on that?
I think Shrikant captured it all, but it really comes down to the priorities, like you said. What is the priority? There's a cost to doing everything, but there's a bigger cost of doing nothing. So we have to make sure that if we do nothing, what is the cost of that? How much will that come back and bite us, be it the emergency funds, reputation, the inefficiencies that it will create, the downtime that it will create. So apart from what Shrikant already added, those are the few other things that I'll add.
Awesome. So moving on to Datta, basically, you have consumer data. You take that while they procure any of the decathlon equipments and whatever you said, right? So if the impact of losing that data is high, how would you go about it?
I don't want to lose the data, first of all, in the first place, actually. Okay, so I hope that never happens. But that being said, I think, let's first prioritize, as we have been actually talking about, what are your crown jewels? And the first crown jewel is your customer data itself. Nothing like that, right? So we have a concept called security by design. If I have to ask you guys one question, how many of you in your organizations have built an effective security by design principle? Anyone? Who can say that there is an effective security by design principle built in my organization which guarantees me that whenever any specific attack happens, okay, first of all, with that security embedded in your product, we will not be compromised at all. Okay, so I think I'm not sure about the answer, but I would still like to tell you that that's one most important concept that we follow as an organization. Having said that, I'm not guaranteeing that today, because no CISOs, if any CISOs say that we are well protected, I think that's a myth. But that being said, today, yes, we have built our resiliency in such a way where there are best practices. We ensure that all our critical systems are rightly audited. We are a PCI DSS compliant organization which takes care of each and every bit of your cloud security, your network security, your compliance policies. From that, if I ever have to talk, they go into the depth of your HR policies as well, as a matter of fact. So that is it's a part of the security best practices that we follow. That being said, today we also have a backup resiliency in place. In fact, if there is anything that goes wrong today, the customers will definitely not face any downtimes. Okay, and we should be able, we have mechanisms to get the systems up and running. But of course, I mean, like, if you tell me, like, that we have all the, even if with such practices, if we cannot have, like, go, or probably there will be no cyber attacks, I don't want to guarantee that for sure. But yes, today, PII is, customer PII is our, is our crown jewel, and we have all the mechanisms to rightly protect it. Thank you.
Awesome. You want to add, Mustafa?
The only thing that I'll say, I really like what you said, that as a CISO, you should never say you are well protected. I think in any organization, the bar for CISO should be so high, and they should be so paranoid that the last person in that organization that says we're well protected should be a CISO.
Should be CISO. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So I think I just want to do a quick time check. How much time do we have? 5 more minutes? Okay. So quickly, last question. We all have regulated entities here. We have customers. And what would be your guidance? Mustafa, let's start with Mustafa. You have seen the SEBI guidelines. There are requirements and so on and so forth. I just want to come back to the SEBI guidelines. And there are mobility risks associated with today, the day-to-day trading that the individual is doing from his phone and so on and so forth, right? We are highly digital, highly technology-oriented today. How do we now have a 360-degree view and implement security around the entire data, and also ensure that we are compliant to the guidelines?
I think I would say a couple of things. Number one, understand it properly first. That is very, very critical, that we have a good understanding of actually what these compliances and regulations are. B, I would say prioritize. Which ones do you want to attack first? Which ones do you want to go after first? Which ones are critical for ensuring your resiliency, mitigating your risk? No visits from regulators, like we don't like any of us like that. And then I would say the last part is don't try to do it all by yourself. There's a lot of help available out there. There's a lot of experts. There's a lot of companies, partners, organizations that either do this for a living or have done it before. And I'm not speaking from coming from a point of give the business to the organization, but network, rely on people, rely on organization that either have done this or are doing it for a living, so you don't have to invent the wheel. Somebody else has blazed that trail, and you can actually start walking on it.
Awesome. Datta, you have...
Yeah, so I think he has covered most of those things, but I'll tell you one aspect of it. Today, say SEBI, say DPDP, they are all focusing more on governance. So building up the right governance is the most critical aspect in your organization. Ensure that governance is strong. If governance is strong, everything else will fall in place. That's one important point. Second, I would like to emphasize on, not only for your organization, ensure your supply chain, your suppliers, or you call your vendor partners, they have to also follow the guidelines very strictly. Those two things.
Srijat sir?
I think I'll define in 2 ways. 3 roles and 3 parameters, and then 1 outcome. Okay. So 3 roles, every organization have 3 roles to play. Either you are a data protector, or you are data protector plus data processor, or you are data protector, data processor plus data sub-processor. These are the 3 roles every organization play. 3 areas from the parameters perspective, which every organization has to observe, is risk, governance, and compliances. If you manage these 3, and if you interlink these 3 roles and the 3 parameters, what comes out is that your business resilience. But if your cyber resilience is higher, naturally your score for your business resilience automatically goes up, because that's your hygiene. So if with this, I just want to summarize that if you are playing as an organization these 3 roles and these 3 parameters, I'm sure that business resiliency will improve because of cyber resiliency. And once business resiliency improves, all outcomes are straightforward in front of you. Reputation, your overall business in the market, number of customers going up, your customer retention goes up. Everything I think is all linked to these 3 plus 3 is what I
Absolutely. So, yeah.
So, most of the things are covered already, but I will say 3 points. In every organizations, we have seen that they have equipped with technologies. but the team who is handling that, okay, and the configurations which we are doing, that is having the loopholes over there, right? And that misconfigurations are play major role in cyber breaches. So that is the first thing, and every organization has to assess their configuration. Second is cyber security awareness, because users and humans are the weakest link in all the cyber security practices, like. So in that case, user awareness is the most important thing. And then while building the cyber resiliency, so every organization has all the processes in place, policies in place, but when you discuss anything about the, let's take a small example of some things, some application is going down. So how you will be, means some application is impacted with cyber attack. So how you will restore that application, and okay, so just do one check in your organization, just have a tabletop discussion on that. So you will come to know lots of gaps, or what we can say, lots of gaps in that, okay. And then you will really feel that, okay, whatever the process and policies are there, that is on the paper, but actually no one is following. Right?
Understood.
And the communication which we wanted to do during the cyber attack, or while doing any cyber crisis, that will not happen. So that is the thing, these three things we need to check religiously in our organization to have a good cyber resilience. And the point which is already mentioned by cyber resilience being the business resilience, and that is the good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I think you made a great point here, that is humans are the weakest link. And that's what SEBI guidelines also addresses. The first thing, which is talking about security awareness for users. That is one. So just to summarize, humans are the weakest link, security awareness is important, GRC is important, governance plays an important role, and then please prioritize of what you want to protect. And with that, I just want to open it up for questions, so that we can panel can take some questions directly. We will try and answer them. If not, everyone is available. Post this panel session, during dinner, we can have these conversations and move forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much, first of all, to all the panelists. Can we have a round of applause for this knowledge-packed panel discussion that we've just had? Thank you so much once again, panelists. Okay, so now I would like to invite somebody just to debrief everything about this panel discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my absolute pleasure to invite Mr. Dinesh Kumar, Sales Director, India and SAARC SOTI. Please give him a huge round of applause.
A very warm welcome to all of you. And first of all, thanks a lot for being here. This is the Mumbai spirit we were talking about, defying rains, defying all the odds. एक शेर याद आ गया मुझे, वक्त बर्बाद करने वालों को वक्त बर्बाद करके छोड़ेगा, उसको हालात ही ना छोड़ेंगे जो खुद को हालात पे छोड़ेगा. And that's what Bombay does. ना वक्त बर्बाद करता है, ना खुद को कभी हालात पे छोड़ता है. It has been the story of India for so many decades now. It is always on the move, 24/7 by 365. So Bombay is India's mission critical engine. Thank you once again. And to summarize, what a beautiful panel discussion this was. An in-depth knowledge on the regulations which are coming, summarized in kind of 20 minutes, 236 pages of the document which are coming in on data security, SEBI guidelines, on data privacy, on security, excellent conversation on CXOs and CISOs interactions, and how the world will pan out from here. Mobility anyway is going to play a very, very big role and key role in the things which will shape up from now onwards. And once again, it is, I think, January 2025 is the deadline, extended to April on 2 clauses by SEBI. So it is going to be a difficult task from now onwards in next 4 months to get all the regulated entities under that compliance framework. So work hard, life will be easier. We work easy, life is going to become harder. So we have to kind of be cognizant of that fact that this is coming. This has already come, announced. It has to be complied. We are in a regulated environment from now onwards. Thanks a lot to all panelists. Mitesh, great job. Thank you, Mustafa, for being with us. Thank you, Datta sir. Thanks, Shrikant, and thanks, Divakar. Thanks a lot for being here. We will be here for another 2-3 hours along with you, so all the questions can be taken up. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're going to open for the Q&A. Yes, they've been waiting for it. So sorry, panelists, I'll have to borrow you for some more time. Audience, I'm sure you guys have questions, right? Can you please raise your hands? This is your opportunity. Please seize it. Anyone, please raise your hands if you have any questions for the panelists. Gentlemen here in the front, can we please pass the mic?
Thank you guys for this wonderful session. And if I looked at the first slide deck, where we realized there are different aspects of the security which has to be covered, and there are different products which are targeting individual aspects out there. It looks like it's more fragmented market right now from a product point of view, which is looking at only a certain areas out there. Do you see a change or the trend happening toward the consolidation, and are there any clear winners out there for the product which gonna target those security aspects?
So basically, for the panelists, the question is that obviously there are various controls that have been protected. There's initial identity access management is one product.
You're the CTO, so first, why don't you?
This came from his slide, that's why I mean. But we can definitely like to see other guys too.
Sure.
I think if you ask me honestly, it's not going to be consolidation.
No, there's not going to be. Yeah, go
See,
ahead.
the consolidation actually from a technology space perspective is going to be difficult. The reason is, if you look at the attacker side, I think that's very well funded. Okay, I think it's like a David and Goliath kind of fight. So when you know very well that from the World Economic Forum also, post, if you ask me from the terrorism, what is the next set of affair for any country or anybody to look at it is always cyber. Now, will the cyber is always divided into multiple areas. Now, for me, from his perspective, as a Bombay Stock Exchange, being critical agency, naturally, we're looking at the national impact from the economic perspective. Somebody else, it will be from impact from their own reputation perspective. So technologies will not get consolidated. What we got to look at is how do we keep evolve actually our SOPs so that we do not really fall back in terms of what's happening. And Gen AI, no AI, GPUs, CPUs, cloud, it doesn't matter. It's just evolving. Whatever I've seen in the last 35 years is very tough. It is continuously evolving. We talked about in COVID era, moving everything to cloud. Now we are talking about, can we shift back everything? There's no answer to it. So there's no consolidation per se is going to happen. And every framework will be always different. We spoke about quantum computing about a couple of years back. We don't find it. Why? Because that framework is completely different. That framework actually needs a complete forklift upgrade. So, but quantum computing had this security embedded into it, right? The question is, can it be done? Yeah, but it can be done, but then at what price or what cost? So some of these things will come back to us, but essentially what's going to remain is that as long as we keep looking at the controls, SOPs, and keep improving our resiliency, that's the only answer which I can give it to you.
Yeah, and what we are seeing in market.
And one point which I want to add last, I think, mobility is at the helm of it, if you ask me honestly.
Exactly.
Because as Mustafa said, in terms of the kind of mobile devices which we're using and the smartphones in that, and the kind of issues which we can face, I think MDM or otherwise has been a subject for almost more than a decade now. But the question is, it is becoming more and more important for us because everything is actually roaming around that device and the user which is using that device. So I think as long as we are looking into some of these aspects, it will be fantastic.
Yeah. And basically what's happening today is that while there are players who are trying to do platformization of security, multiple products, multiple modules into one single platform, trying to do that, but it's a question of risk. Do I want to really put all eggs in one basket? And that's where always, like for health, we keep searching for best doctor in cardiology, best doctor in this. You can't go to a general physician and say that I'm going to please make me healthy across the board. Okay? So similarly, if you look at cybersecurity, defense in depth also means that I'm going to have multiple layers and each layer has to be protected by a best of the breed product. And I would not, as a CISO, I used to be a CISO, so I can tell you, I would not prefer to have a single platform and put all my eggs in one basket and have an incident like what we had a couple of months back, maybe. So, yes, there are players, but it's a question and it's a choice, and it's purely a decision based on your risk profile. That's the way I would look at it.
That makes sense. Thank you.
The only point I will say as an exchange, like how you are managing your own portfolio, the same way we need to manage the risk in our portfolio.
Absolutely. Yeah, that comes from absolutely BSc. So any other questions that you want the panel to answer? Super. So no questions. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you to all the panelists. You guys have been amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, can we have a huge round of applause once again? Thank you so much.